Adolfo Constanzo, the narco-satanist. In late 1986, rumors spread about a man who claimed he could make criminals invisible and untouchable. That man was Adolfo Constanzo, also known as the narco-satanist, a self-proclaimed sorcerer who quietly began assembling a cult on the border between Mexico and Texas, promising power, protection, and wealth to anyone who followed him. He fused drug trafficking with a twisted version of the Palo Mayombe, which is a spiritual tradition from Central African roots, focused on protection and guidance through a sacred cauldron and natural elements. But Constanzo warped it into something sinister, as he forced his followers into ritual killings to grant them supernatural powers and shield their crimes from the law. He performed the cult's first confirmed ritual in early 1987, which kept up till 1989. Constanzo ordered his followers to kidnap people he claimed would feed the power of their rituals. He demanded the victims to stay conscious for certain ceremonial steps, removing specific body parts that he believed would strengthen the magical cauldron, or called as Nganga. At least 16 people were killed by the cult during this period, though the exact numbers may be higher. On March 14, 1989, the disappearance of a foreign tourist sparked a joint investigation by U.S. and Mexican authorities. On April 1, 1989, during one of the police checkpoints, a car didn't stop, so the officers decided to follow it. The cult member thought he was protected by magic, but instead, he led them to their ranch. On April 11, 1989, authorities raided the Santa Elena ranch and uncovered ritual altars, ceremonial tools, and multiple shallow graves, exposing the scale of Constanzo's crimes. He fled to Mexico City with his closest followers. On May 6, 1989, police tracked them to an apartment. He refused to be captured and ordered a follower to just shoot him, while the remaining members surrendered and the cult was officially dismantled, ending the 3 years of ritual violence and terror. Yahweh Ben Yahweh, Nation of Yahweh. In 1979, Hulan Mitchell Jr., also known as Yahweh Ben Yahweh, founded the Nation of Yahweh in Miami, Florida. He claimed to be a prophet and the Son of God, telling his followers that African Americans were the true descendants of the biblical Israelites. His teachings demanded complete loyalty, staying away from society and listening to him without questions. But the Nation of Yahweh was more than just a religious community. It was a dangerous cult. He didn't personally kill anyone, but he created a group of loyal followers called Death Angels to commit violence. They were responsible for enforcing his rules, warning and punishing anyone who questioned him, disobeyed him, or tried to leave the group through physical attacks like beating, stabbing, and more. Followers were often told that carrying out these orders was a test of faith, a way to prove their loyalty and devotion to him and the community. Investigators later linked Yahweh Ben Yahweh to up to 14 killings, all part of a pattern to control and intimidate members and rivals. Authorities began investigating the Nation of Yahweh in the late 1980s, after several suspicious deaths linked to former members. Law enforcement worked with ex-followers who were willing to testify, providing detailed accounts of how Yahweh Ben Yahweh organized and ruled the cult. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and extortion in May 1992 and sentenced to 18 years in prison, but he was released in 2001. Charles Manson, the Manson family. In late 1969, a charismatic and manipulative man named Charles Manson began forming a cult in California, also known as the Manson family. His followers were mostly young people who felt lost and abandoned their homes, families, and jobs. They lived together in an isolated commune, sharing every meal, chores, and even relationships commanded by him. He manipulated them with a mix of charm, drugs, and psychological control, convincing them that society was corrupt and only complete loyalty to him could keep them safe from an impending race war. He called it Helter Skelter. On August 9th and 10th, 1969, he ordered his followers to commit a series of brutal murders at 2 residences, resulting in 9 deaths over 2 nights. These victims were not entirely random. Some were chosen for their wealth, fame, or to shock the society, while others served to test the loyalty of his followers. Among the 9 people killed, 6 were men and 3 were women, including one woman who was 8 months pregnant. The attacks were violent, carried out with knives and blunt objects. After the murders, the crime scenes were staged with words like pig, war, and helter-skelter, or paw print to mimic Black Panther symbol on the front door and other messages left on walls, all meant to terrify and mislead the investigations. Manson also planned the killings to look like they were committed by others, attempting to create racial tension and chaos. Eventually, the authorities caught Manson and his followers. Evidence from crime scenes and statements from some of the cult members leading to their arrests. Manson was arrested in 1969 and later convicted in 1971 of conspiracy to commit murder, along with several members of the Manson family. Joseph DiMambro and Luc Jouret, Order of the Solar Temple. In the early 1980s, a secret cult called the Order of the Solar Temple was founded by Joseph DiMambro, a Swiss businessman, and Luc Jouret, a Belgian physician. The cult was inspired by mystical energy, ancient warrior symbols, and visions of the end of the world. They convinced their followers that the world was about to end, and only through the cult could they achieve spiritual ascension and immortality. Between 1994 and 1997, authorities discovered that the cult had been involved in a series of ritualized murders and mass suicides in Switzerland, France, and Canada, claiming around 74 deaths. In Switzerland, 53 bodies were found, including the group leaders arranged in a circle, some with plastic bags over their heads, others dressed in robes, and several buildings were set on fire. In France, 16 members were discovered in a remote forest, arranged in a star pattern, killed by shooting, injection, and suffocation, with evidence suggesting that some were murdered by other members before the rest took their own lives. In Canada, cabins were burned with 5 more members inside. In one case, even children were among the deceased. Some members died willingly, believing they were ascending to a higher spiritual plane, while others were forced to die by leaders or fellow members. Both DiMambro and Jouret died during the cult's mass suicide events in 1994, and in the following years, authorities investigated and prosecuted surviving members, with trials continuing into late 1990s. Shoko Asahara, Aum Shinrikyo. In 1984, a small meditation school in Tokyo was founded by Shoko Asahara, a partially blind yoga instructor. By 1989, he registered it as a religious organization called Aum Shinrikyo. This gave the group legal protection and helped it grow quickly. Asahara mixed distorted ideas from Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic beliefs. He demanded loyalty, isolated the members from their families, and positioned himself as the only way to save them, as he claimed that the world would end soon. By the early 1990s, the group had thousands of followers, lots of money, and several buildings, including secret labs. Inside these labs, Aum scientists were pressured to make dangerous chemical weapons, such as sarin and VX, which the cult tested and used in attack against critics, investigators, and defectors. In 1994, Aum carried out its first large-scale chemical attack in Matsumoto. They released sarin gas in an attempt to target judges involved in a case related to the cult, but civilians were also affected. 8 people died, and hundreds were injured. As the police investigated who was responsible for the crime, the leader ordered a bigger attack to create confusion and stop the investigation. On March 20th, 1995, 5 Aum members boarded different Tokyo subway trains during the busy morning rush hour. Each carried a plastic bag filled with liquid sarin. They placed the bags on the floor, poked holes in them using sharpened umbrellas, and left the trains. The gas spread quickly through the trains and stations, killing 13 people and injuring more than 5,000. After the attack, Japan launched its largest police operation. On March 22, 1995, officers raided Aum's buildings and discovered chemical labs, weapons, and documents linking the group to earlier crimes. The leader hid in a small underground room at the cult's main compound, but after weeks of searching, police found him on May 16, 1995. He was arrested and given the death penalty for leading the attacks. On July 6, 2018, he was executed by hanging along with senior members of the cult. If you'd like to see more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.